Hello and welcome to the Play Review with me, Douglas Schatz.
And me, Jodi Rylett.
Hi, Jodi.
Hi, Douglas.
So we've got brief reviews of 3 shows today, starting with James Graham's Punch, which is currently on at the Young Vic here in London. This production started at the Nottingham Playhouse last year and is based on the true local story of Jacob Dunn, who in an altercation outside a pub in Nottingham punched a young man, James Hodgkinson, who subsequently died in hospital. Jacob was sent to prison for manslaughter. He was only 19 at the time. The play leads us up to this fatal event and then tells the extraordinary story of Jacob's rehabilitation, the centerpiece of which was his entering into a voluntary process of restorative justice, during which he met with James's parents, who had asked to talk with Jacob about why and how the terrible encounter had happened, as well as to let him understand the harm that he had caused. So, that's the bare bones of the story. What did you make, Jodi, of this dramatization of it?
I found it incredibly moving, exciting, thoroughly enjoyable, if given the harshness of the topic. I thought it was a great piece of theatre. It wasn't, who am I to say that a James Graham smash isn't perfect? I had some issues, some small issues, but overall, sometimes I find theatre doesn't move me as much as perhaps sometimes TV and film can, as in literally move me to tears. And I was a mess at one point during this. I mean, almost like ugly crying at the back. Couldn't get hold of my tissues without disturbing everybody. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that says a huge amount about both the writing and the acting and the production.
Yeah. Well, it's very powerful stuff. I thought you can really feel the pain of the tragedy, firstly, of James's parents who lose their son in a seemingly pointless act of teenage violence. And it paints a very scary picture of the culture of toxic masculinity that Jacob grows up in, where he and his mates' idea of a good night out is to find or start a good punch up, literally. And I thought the staging of this story was really well done, fantastically fluid, particularly the first half unrolls at a cracking pace with constant movement, recreating this gang of marauding teenagers of which Jacob's a part as they meet and drink and sell drugs and fight. And then the second half gets much quieter, which, if anything, is more powerful as Jacob and James's parents, Joan and David, move tentatively toward meeting and then do meet. And that is a fabulously powerful, quiet scene. Just 4 people sitting on chairs and awkwardly trying to address this huge thing between them. That was quite a moment.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that's what broke me. The line shortly before that set me off as well was when the intermediary from the Restorative Justice Organisation was talking to both parties and sharing questions via letter, first of all, that they would answer for one another. And they ask him what he's going to do next. And he just says, how can they ask that? And I thought at first he was pushing the question away, but it was, how can they, after what I have done to them, care for one moment what I do with the rest of my life? And the enormity of what that mother in particular was doing in reaching out to him was phenomenal in that moment. And he saw it. It's like, how can people be that good?
Yeah, and that did actually change his life. It made him start to ask the question himself and feel that there was a point in pursuing something else with his life thereafter. There was a wonderful little detail in that scene, I thought, that, again, I think it was the facilitator said to Joan and David before they came in that when tense, Jacob will not be able to make eye contact. And sure enough, he stares rigidly at the floor the whole time, even as he's speaking. And it was a lovely touch because you're watching him all the time so acutely as to how he's dealing with and processing what's going on.
Yeah, and how he conveyed that, it's different in television. They'd have been right up cutting close to him. Could you talk very quickly about the pacing that you described, how fast it was at the beginning? What I thought was quite genius is that for all it was frenetic and almost thrumming with this energy and also on the edge of potential violence any moment, it actually was telling the story almost in real time. So it took its time leading up to the event, and then it told it all again, because he's sort of recounting it in the first half as well, in a sort of a therapy session. So I thought that was very, very clever.
Yes. Let's talk about the performances because they are excellent, particularly David Shields, I thought is phenomenal as Jacob, isn't he?
He is phenomenal, and that actor needed to be, because really a lot of it, particularly the first half, is almost like a monologue with supporting characters dropping in and out. He is carrying the whole story. He's telling it, he's saying it, he's showing it with his physicality. He's running up the stairs that replicate the sort of stairs you get in precincts that then go over the top of an underpass. He's running into the underpass. People are jumping off the walls. That pent up energy, him searching for drama, the drop in his shoulders, the swing of his arms, and the power in him, it was palpable.
Yes, he was certainly wired with this menacing energy. And then he becomes somewhat confused, more vulnerable, and guilty, of course, without knowing how to accept his guilt thereafter. He keeps referring to the incident as an accident
Yeah, I didn't mean to do it. Yeah.
until he's forced to accept that throwing a punch is not an accident. And actually, you're talking to me about carrying this as almost like a monologue. It reminded me, if you saw it, of Thomas Coombs in the recent production of Death of England in the West End, which was also a blistering portrayal of a raging young working class man.
Yes, it did remind me of that. And in the ensemble nature of it, in this case, the people actually played multiple roles where they slip easily in and out of those characters.
Yeah, it's very nicely constructed in that way by Graham. And still talking about the performances, I thought Julie Hesmondall as Joan, the mother, is absolutely fabulous, as she always is, I think. She exudes the most admirable kind of tender humanity, I think.
Yes. With a real, always down to earth, real common touch. And she has a comic timing that's brilliant as well. Certain times she's reaching for words like we always do. So in these very serious moments, she'll be trying to find a word. She's going, I know the only word I can think of is pontifract. And the word she's looking for is punitive. And it's just lots of little moments like that. And it's hard to do a role like that and not overplay it, because the emotion must be just pouring out of them.
Yes, or I think over sentimentalize it as well, which she doesn't do. You talked about some quibbles. I have a couple as well. What were yours?
So my main quibble was it insisted on itself a bit too much at the end. It became too didactic. As I was being told this story, I'd already drawn my conclusion that went, wow, look at all of the public sector services that have caught this boy time and time and time again. All these different nets, the parole officer, the teacher at the college, the people at the juvenile detention centre. Look at all these people who've caught him. And then at the end, there's this huge kind of over the top party political broadcast almost about how terrible it is about services being cut and so on. I think we can trust audiences more. I don't think you need to do that. And I don't think you have to over embellish. I could have been left with the pain of that meeting between the three of them. We know that his life turned out well. We didn't have to have it so very much insisted upon. I felt it put a little bit too much saccharin on at the end.
Yeah, that's possibly true. I mean, it's fascinating that this is a good news story at the end of this painful ride, though. That's the reality, right? In real life, his rehabilitation is amazing because he goes on to get a degree with, as you mentioned, Joan and David's encouragement. And he and James's parents go on to work together to campaign about the dangers of one punch. And they work together in this charity called the Forgiveness Project, which collects and shares stories from both victims and survivors and perpetrators of crime and helps them to rebuild their lives following trauma like this. I was actually fortunate enough to be in on a night when the real Jacob Dunn and some people from the Forgiveness Project gave a short talk and Q&A afterwards. And it was pretty uplifting to see what Jacob has become without sugaring over what he had done. He said, I've become defined by the worst thing I ever did. And he wrote this book called Right from Wrong, which I guess he's trying to do.
Yeah.
So there's some truth in that. But I agree with you that even before that, political points are being made too overtly, a bit heavy handed about austerity in the prison system, or even there are some lectures about urban planning and things. It just felt pedantic in the flow of the drama. It was not necessary.
Yeah, it pulled me out of it. However, these are minor quibbles of what was a great piece of theatre.
Yes, because overall it packs a punch. Sorry about that. It's a very memorable piece, I think, which shows some of the worst and best of humanity.
Yeah.
And I also think it's one of James Graham's better pieces, actually. It feels emotionally deeper and possibly more genuine than some of his other popular work because it comes from where he comes from to some degree, I think, and it's based on this true story, which is very powerful in itself. His work's always very well fashioned, but I'm not necessarily as affecting as this, I think. So we recommend Punch, which runs at the Young Vic until the 26th of April. And I was pleased to learn we'll also go to Broadway this autumn. So that's interesting. A local British story going to New York like that. Wish it well.
Absolutely wish it well.
So next we have a new version of Chekhov's The Seagull at the Barbican, with a starry cast headed by Cate Blanchett in the role of the starry actress Arkadina, with Tom Burke as her lover, the famous writer Trigorin, Emma Corrin as the aspiring young actress Nina, who inadvisedly falls for Trigorin, and a fantastic list of very good stage actors rounding out Chekhov's ensemble cast. The production is directed by the German director Thomas Ostermeyer in an adaptation written by Ostermeyer and playwright Duncan Macmillan. This is the same team that brought an updated version of Ibsen's An Enemy of the People to the West End last year, with Matt Smith leading that cast. So, I was excited to see this for many reasons, topmost being to see Cate Blanchett on stage in one of my favorite plays of all time. So, Jodi, what did you make of this take on Chekhov?
Well, I did really like it.
Oh, good, good. We're going to have a discussion here then.
That's what I thought. I can't wait to hear what you thought of it because I know that you were not a big fan of The Enemy of the People. So, do you know what I loved about it? First of all, I got to see Cate Blanchett and I thought she thoroughly enjoyed playing that part and she was great at it and she was well cast. So, she led the cast beautifully. I liked the way that the music was shoehorned into it. I liked the opening. He came on and said, I know what you're thinking. That's not how the seagull starts. And I thought, oh, half of the people in the room are going to hate that.
That's
But,
me.
but I quite like it.
So it's Zachary Hart who comes out at the beginning with an electric guitar around his neck and shouts, "Are you ready for some Chekhov?" And my answer was, yes, I am. But actually, they didn't really deliver me straight Chekhov, but we'll come to that.
Okay. Well, when I get irritated with productions where the director's vision has got in the way, I get irritated because the vision becomes more important than the story, and I lose the story and I lose the characters. So, what I still got from this version was I still very much got the sense of place, this faded glory mansion in the countryside on a lake. I got that feel. I got the sense for the passage of time. All of the tragic love triangles were very clear. So, all of that stood. All of that said, the first half I thought zipped along brilliantly and I was very happy at the interval. And then everything after that, I mean, the play does lend itself to everything after that. It's a bit, oh, it's quite hard going anyway. I felt it lost a huge amount of energy. And I think it's partly the Cate Blanchett star goes out because she's not as present in the second half.
No, that's true. And I think they let it unroll at a very slow pace. I mean, it's very long overall, just in total, which I think is a problem. Fundamentally, I just don't think that Chekhov requires such obvious reconceptualizing as this sort of piece of modern meta. There was a lot of meta going on, people addressing the audience directly in microphones and that sort of thing, which he used in Enemy of the People as well. And I just think that they're not giving us enough credit that Chekhov can stand on its own. And they have to somehow signal all the themes and make it jazzier than it needs to be. I mean, that said, I enjoyed myself at certain times because, I mean, I just think the genius and the humor in the original play shines through. And I have this overall sense, really, that there is this wonderful original play struggling to get out from behind, as you referred to it, this director's conceptual take on it. And I think Macmillan's language in the adaptations there, it's actually possible to deliver it differently, but it just gets swamped by these devices and tricks of modernizing it in some way.
Yeah. So what irritated me enormously, and it was used more in the second half than the first, was those mics. So when I came in, I saw the stage. I really liked there's a crop in the middle of reeds The people arrive and exit and hide in, and it works really, really well.
Oh, yeah. I love the set, actually. They have this clump of tall standing reeds upstage, which they all have to rustle through to appear onto the stage.
Yeah. And it never got old, did it?
No, and it evokes the lakeside setting very nicely.
Yeah, it's a very simple device. So that all worked really beautifully. But then my heart sank when I saw those two mics on the stand. I thought, oh no, tell me we're not going to have this. And then I thought, right, well, try to open your mind, Jodes, and try and see what the director's trying to do by using that. What are the moments he chooses for them to take to the mics? And I couldn't work it out. I couldn't see any why, any rhyme or reason.
No, I agree with you. Although there are times when it's because they're speaking directly to the audience and there's a speech about theater. Of course, the play is a lot about the nature of theater, but they're sort of telling us, having to point all this out to you. I think we can be left to work out the contemporary resonances and relevance of Chekhov's themes ourselves without these kind of interventions. Let's talk about the performances. You mentioned Cate Blanchett, who is hugely watchable, of course, and is a very brave physical performance as the imperious, attention-seeking star. And I guess she's well cast in that sense. She dances wildly, throws herself on the ground, does the splits even at one stage, half undresses. But for me, I found that too histrionic. I just thought she didn't need to be quite so unhinged to demonstrate the self-centeredness and the emotional blindness. That could have been achieved without this over-the-top kind of frantic energy. That's a director's decision, I assume.
Yes.
So I was disappointed by that rendition, to be honest.
So I didn't mind it. I liked it. It's interesting. My husband came with me and he wasn't wholly convinced by it either, but I think for a slightly different reason. He couldn't really separate what he knows of Cate Blanchett as being this really intelligent, rounded individual. He just felt like she was catastrophically badly cast as that kind of foolish, throwing yourself around person.
Well, I think it could be more subtle, actually, and still be as effective. And then I also felt that Tom Burke, as Trigorin, lacked a charisma or heft required to match her as the acclaimed writer. And I didn't for a minute really believe that he would be with this Arkadina as she was. And I also didn't feel any real chemistry between him and Nina. There's supposed to be a real frisson there, I'd say. Did you get any of that? What did you think of his performance?
With things, I never understand why anybody fancies that character. I just never get it.
Oh, come on. He is an acclaimed writer.
Yeah, I know. But they're always self-involved, batting on about themselves. I don't buy into this trope of literature and theatre that the great intellectual man is necessarily that sexually attractive.
Okay, well, I think there's something more personal in that.
So this is very personal.
Because Nina falls for him big time, and that's the point.
What is the nature of theatre and art, isn't it?
And I think we should see some of that charisma from him. And he was very low-key. And I think part of the problem in the second half is that they have these very extended conversations at such a desultory pace.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Which didn't work for me. However, I enjoyed some of the smaller parts even more, actually, than these lead roles. Jason Watkins, as the long-suffering Soren, was very funny, I thought, as was Tanya Reynolds as the melodramatically miserable Masha, which is a part made for her, I thought. She was great at that.
She is excellent. She's going from strength to strength, everything you see her in. I so believed how depressed Masha was.
Yes.
From the way she stood, from the clothes she wore, from her entire demeanor, everything. She was great.
Cody Smith-McPhee, I thought was fine as the tortured young writer Constantine. I mean, his was perhaps the most conventional rendering, I thought, of Chekhov's character in the cast.
Yeah. I liked the guy again who came on with the guitar. Zachary Hart, was it? I thought he had a great warmth and connection with the audience. That then made me feel even sadder for the way that his unrequited love played out with Masha and the sadness of his later life.
Yes, he engendered sympathy, didn't he? He's very put upon. I'm just ultimately disappointed, not to say cross, as I came out, about the arrogance of the director who believes he has to mess so much with a great play. And I'm sure there'll be many who disagree with me, as some reviewers did. This is a show that will split the camp on its treatment of Chekhov, I suspect.
Definitely.
Okay, well, the Seagull, whether you like it or not, is on at the Barbican until the 5th of April. Our final show for review today is Playhouse Creatures at the small Orange Tree Theatre in Richmond-upon-Thames. This play was written by April DeAngelis and was first performed back in 1993 and tells the story of a group of female actors who were the first to be allowed on the professional stage back in the time of Charles I in the 1660s. The most famous of which was, of course, Nell Gwyn, who ultimately became the king's mistress. The play shows us the challenges that these women faced as they sought to gain creative acceptance as well as simply to make a living, many believing them to be nothing more than prostitutes. We see Nell Gwyn emerge as the most popular young star, fighting her way up from selling oranges in a market stall, blagging her way into a trial on the stage, and finally to stardom and thence to the king's bedchamber via the back stairs of the royal palace. Although she is the star name, she's not necessarily the leading lady. This is very much an ensemble piece with an all-female cast of 5 playing actresses in the company. So, Jodi, what did you think of this slice of restoration drama?
I loved seeing these 5 women on the stage. Lots of things I loved about it. The pacing, the energy, the little vignettes that they played out of the melodramas that they were putting before the crowds were done with great humour and gusto and very much in keeping with that sort of restoration over the top style of acting. So all of that was great. I loved the fact that they were all real people who had existed. And I've seen a lot of plays recently about great men in history. And it's wonderful to hear a story of they're not great women. They didn't change the course of history. Well, they kind of did, though.
They did, yeah. They were pretty brave.
Yeah, they were pretty brave. I just thought it was a lot of energy, a lot of fun. Do I think it's the best plot in the world? No, it could have done with more plotting for me.
Yes.
It had all the bare bones of it. Like there was a moment where we had witchcraft and we had a waxed figure that had pins put in it. We thought, wow, what are the ramifications going to be of that? And it was almost just like dashed off in a sidebar with sort of one line, and then that was the ramifications of that then. So I feel like it could have been a bigger, more dramatic play than it was. That's in the writing, though. I think this production was great.
Yeah, I mean, the performers are all good. I think what you're leading to, I agree with, is I just don't think the play is substantial enough ultimately. But let's just talk about the cast and the characters for a little bit. I mentioned that Nell Gwyn was the star name at the time, but in the play, the leading lady is really this Mrs. Betterton, who's the longest serving member of the company, wife of the theater's impresario, and at least initially sole shareholder, Mr. Betterton. And Mrs. Betterton started off playing men's roles in disguise until the liberation, so to speak, only for her to be overtaken by the young and up-and-coming girls such as Nell Gwyn. And Anna Chancellor is very good, I thought, as the commanding Mrs. Betterton. In the first half, she rules the roost, dispensing pearls of wisdom on acting technique, etc., to the younger wannabes. And then, stoically, if sadly, she accepts her fate as the new generation passes her by. So I thought she captured all of that very well. She's commanding presence, actually, on the stage.
She is.
And then we had Zoe Bruff as Nell Gwyn, and I thought she had a sort of charming, kind of cheeky knowingness, and as well as steely determination, which she obviously needed to have, as she does what it takes to get to the top. Catherine Kingsley is blousy and defiant as another actress, Mrs. Marshall, who battles to preserve her reputation in the face of patriarchal deception and abuse. She did that well, too. Nicole Sawyer suffers even more, losing her livelihood because she becomes pregnant when seeking to advance herself.
By the king.
Yes, and Donna Kroll, who brings it all down to earth. I really enjoyed her as the company's stage manager and Dog's Body, but she brings a welcome droll humor and honesty to it all that undercuts the pretensions of the rest, and it provides a dose of reality. So the cast are all very good, but I just sort of felt that the whole thing doesn't amount to anything particularly substantial. The story arcs of each of these characters are lightly sketched in and pretty predictable. And the themes are obvious as well. I mean, it's not that these aren't important or valid themes of misogyny and ageism and the sexual compromise that they have to go through to secure economic and social protection of a man. They're all just signaled a bit too clearly, I thought.
Yeah, it feels like there is a great play waiting to get out of the bones of this, to be honest. I really enjoyed seeing Anna Chancellor, Catherine Kingsley, Donna Kroll. I mean, the younger actresses were, of course, great too, but the 3 of them, I mean, astonishing presence, charisma. I mean, Catherine Kingsley, I saw her in Top Girls at the National, and I can't understand why we don't see more of her. Ditto with Donna Kroll. They are these hugely commanding, very charismatic actors who could easily carry whole shows as big leads. So it was wonderful to see them. And Catherine Kingsley is fearless with her breasts. I'm sorry to say it, but I'm sorry to bring that into this show. But
No,
honestly,
impressive.
they were stars and she used them to great effect. I mean, poor people in the front row of the audience, well, they got more than an eyeful and she thoroughly enjoyed it, which was totally in keeping with what they did, because that was the frisson, the excitement of going to the theatre, that you could see scantily clad women. It was titillating and sexualized, and that was done very well in the play. And actually, I thought the soundscape was done very well. The sort of baying of the crowd outside, thinking, crikey, they're all just a moment from being literally mauled here.
I think you're right. The casting is very impressive for this small scale production, in fact. And I enjoyed, as you referred to earlier, the snippets of performance that we see of the actresses plying their trade on the stage, delivering parts of Shakespeare, even. And at one point, there's a really nice sword fight where the two of them are dressed as foppish men, which I enjoyed. So all of that's great. But actually, strangely, there were these moments where the tone veered a bit too sharply from this frothy pastiche stuff. There's this point where they're almost about to enact a backstreet abortion. And that just seemed to come out of nowhere and got a bit uncomfortable in an otherwise completely different play almost.
Yes, that's right. And slightly misjudged in the tininess of the orange tree space. That action, I would have chosen for that to be off. It's in the writing, but I wouldn't have had it so visible, because you are literally inches away from somebody who a moment ago was being melodramatic in a pastiche of some show. So yeah, that tonally was a little bit off. Anna Chancellor gets a moment to recount all of Lady Macbeth's dream sequence, which she does beautifully in character, as well as just technically brilliantly. And she also does a really well rendered speech around how sad it was that before she could officially be an actress, she got to play the big roles, she got to play Hal, all those things that actually nowadays women do get the opportunity to play Lear and Hamlet and so on and so forth. But it was a long time coming.
But it was another testament to the patriarchy, wasn't it? That all the best roles are for men, and she had to pretend to be one to have them.
Yes, particularly Shakespeare. They had a little nod to Aphra Behn, at least in it at one moment. Nell Gwyn had just been cast in an Aphra Behn play. She'd written the play for her before she decides to go off and live as a mistress to the king permanently and give up the stage. So yeah, it was a lovely night at the theatre, beautifully acted. It was a good production of what was just an okay play. But I think this is the sadness, is that they'll have been looking for a play that had more female historical characters at its heart during a season about historical figures. And they've been very male plays, the Churchill in Moscow, here in America.
And I guess it wears its messages and the research on its sleeve a little too obviously, I thought. I mean, it's a slightly interesting snapshot of a quite interesting period of social and theatrical history, but I just think it was a bit insubstantial for me. So 3 stars, I'd say. Anyway, Playhouse Creatures continues at the Orange Tree until the 12th of April, and then actually moves on to Guildford and the Theatre Royal in Bath for a week each later in April. So you have other chances to see it. Thank you, Jodi. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please visit theplaypodcast.com to share your comments, or email us at plays@theplaypodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.